Okay, welcome back. We are on chapter 11 of the Ghost Grave. Remember in chapter 10, Josh planned out his quest. Okay, so he found a towel and a spade. He got a hatchet so they could chop up that rose bush that he has to uh, where Willie is buried. You know, there's the rose bush all around it. He figured out he was going to bring flowers so that just in case anybody saw him, he could just say that he was planting flowers. Um, he brought water just in case he gets thirsty. The one thing he does not have is gloves, so we'll see if that is a problem. Um, and then he also wrote another note to his mother, another letter to his mother, and he actually told her what he was going to do. He said that he told her about Willie. So he hasn't sent it yet, but if he ends up sending that, I wonder how his mother will react to that. Okay, let's continue with chapter 11. All right, before I continue, chapter 11 talks about, it's not even talking about Willie or Josh. So it's kind of giving us some background information about something that tells us a little story about something that we'll need to know about. Okay, and it's Mr. Turlip. Now, if you remember, Mr. Turlip was the manager of the bank. Okay, and we learned that when we found out about the money being stolen from the Cash for Critters, you know, when they were trying to build the rescue place for the strays and for the animals, the animal shelter. Okay, so just so you know, this is kind of like a sidetrack. Okay, here we go. Mr. Turlip did not look like a criminal. Wearing a navy blue suit, white shirt, and a tan striped necktie, he watched as his assistant locked the bank's front door. He waited while his employees left their posts, said goodnight to each other, and headed home. Whoa, what a way to start that. He didn't look like a criminal. Is he a criminal? Let's see. When he was the only one left in the building, he took the calendar out of his top desk drawer, and as he did each day at closing time, drew a big black X through June 18th, that day's date. He'd done this every day for more than 2 years, even taking the calendar home with him on weekends so he could X out the Saturdays and Sundays. Except on the 13th of each month, Mr. Turlip felt it might be bad luck to cross out the number 13, so every month he left it untouched. Okay, so that kind of tells us that Mr. Turlip is kind of superstitious. Okay, he believes in those things where the 13th is an unlucky number and all that kind of stuff. We may need to know that a little later on. Each X brought him one day closer to the happiest moment of his life, the time when he would walk out of the Hillside Bank forever, retrieve the money, and start his new life in Florida. He would spend every day fishing in the sunshine and would never again, not once, sit behind a desk in a bank. What money are they talking about? Mr. Turlip had begun working at the bank 43 years ago as a trainee and had slowly worked his way up to manager. He had relished the work for many years, but he didn't enjoy it anymore. Now the government regulations and the unnecessary paperwork and the intense competition with huge national banks had taken all the pleasure away. Even the customers were less polite and more demanding. Everyone wanted to borrow money, but no one wanted to save it. Mr. Turlip loosened his necktie and went out the back entrance, making sure the door locked securely behind him. He walked to his car, started the engine, and began the second part of his bi-weekly ritual. Bi-weekly means twice a week. Okay, ritual means that something that he does twice a week, but all the time. Okay, twice a week on his way home from work, he drove 30 miles out of his way in order to go past the sleepy little Carbon City Cemetery where he buried the money. He didn't worry that someone might accidentally find it. In all the months, 780 days to be exact, since he'd hidden it, he had never seen a person in the cemetery. His visits were a way to comfort himself after a hard day's work and to stay focused on his plan of never having to work again. He liked to drive slowly past the little graveyard, his eyes on the spot he'd chosen, while he thought of what lay hidden there and how it would soon enrich his life. By now, he'd nearly forgotten that the money didn't really belong to him, that he'd taken it at gunpoint from two terrified bank customers as they approached the night deposit box. He had erased from his memory the fact that the entire community had been outraged by the theft of the Cash for Critters proceeds. Oh my goodness, he stole the money? At the time, he had pretended to be as furious as everyone else. As manager of the Hillside Bank, he had posted a $1,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the thief, and then he had personally matched that amount. Well, of course he's going to personally match it. He's the one who took it. When his customers thanked him for his generosity, he had said, "Whoever did this robbed us not only of our animal shelter, but also of our community spirit. It's tragic. That's what it is. It's tragic." Much of the money was in $100 bills. The rest he exchanged over a week's time for more $100 bills until that was all he had. He bundled the bills securely, locked them in the small metal box he'd bought, and then used the ideal hiding place. The crime was never solved. So eventually people quit talking about it and went about their business. The police had meth labs, drunk drivers, and assaults to deal with each day. With no clues to go on and no suspect, the theft of the Cash for Critters money slid gradually into the unsolved category, where the case was ignored. The money was not forgotten by Mr. Turlip. Each day at closing time, as he X'd out the date, he thought of the difference the box of cash would make in his life. Without it, his retirement years would be meager. With it, he could live out his dream. He should not have had to resort to theft in order to have a comfortable retirement. After years of living frugally and saving his money, Mr. Turlip's dreams had been crushed by a corporate scandal that cost him, through no fault of his own, all his savings. Unscrupulous officers of the company where Mr. Turlip's pension was invested had bilked the shareholders of millions. The money he had counted on for his retirement vanished. Okay, so let me explain this. So what Mr. Turlip had done for years was he had put money aside, okay, for his retirement. And he had invested this money. And then the place that he invested his money, there is some people there that were unscrupulous, which means they did things against ethics or against what should be done, okay? They were bad people, and they cheated the money. And so because of that, he lost all of his retirement. Okay. So he had been living frugally. Frugally means he saved a lot. He did not spend a lot of money. So here's Mr. Turlip, who had been living frugally, saving his money, investing his money so that he could retire and move to Florida and have this great life. Well, then, through no fault of his own, people took his money and he lost all of his investments. Okay. He lost all of his money for his retirement. So now, instead of, thinking of other ways to earn money, he decides to steal the money from Cash for Critters. Okay, so you kind of feel bad for him that he lost all of his retirement money, but you think that that gives him the right to steal money from the community? I don't think so. Okay, so when the news sank in that he had lost his personal savings and his bank pension, which were invested in the same place, Mr. Turlip changed. Overnight, the man who had always been a mild-mannered, law-abiding banker became a bitter, cold-hearted criminal. He knew his Social Security income wouldn't buy the coveted condo on the beach, nor would it be enough to pay for weekly deep-sea fishing trips. The life he'd dreamed of for years had been within his grasp, and then it had vanished, until he'd planned and pulled off the perfect crime. Who had been hurt by his theft? Nobody. It wasn't as if he'd taken food from starving children or medicines from cancer patients. Oh, sure, a few hundred dogs and cats were left to fend for themselves each year instead of getting food, veterinary care, and loving homes. No big deal about that. They weren't any worse off than they'd always been around here. Mr. Turlip had worked hard all his life. He deserved a happy retirement. Now, with only one more day to go, the time was almost here. Tomorrow, Friday, June 19th, he would make the last X, leave the bank for the last time, and make his final drive to the Carbon City Cemetery. What else is going on tomorrow in the Carbon City Cemetery? Oh my gosh. Tonight, he would finish packing. Tomorrow, he would dig up his money and head for Florida. Those fish were waiting for him. That's it. I told you it was going to get good. That's the end of chapter 11. So now we know who stole the money from the Cash for Critters. It's Mr. Turlip. Okay? And he buried it in the cemetery, the same cemetery that Josh is going to go to and dig up. I hope they don't meet. Okay? I wonder what's going to happen. Well, tune in tomorrow and you'll find out. See you then.